TriMet Board of Directors meeting. Before we start our actual business meeting, we're going to go into the public forum, which is for all matters related to our resolutions and anything else that you would like to address the board on within our purview. For those watching, this is an area we put on the beginning of each agenda for 45 minutes. And we have individual comments limited to 3 minutes, depending on the number of speakers. We have a limited number today, so 3 minutes is fine. If individuals wish to share additional information, they may complete a comment card that will be provided to the board and made part of the board record. Also, for your information, we have a sign up outside. People were allowed to sign up from 8:30 till 9. We cut that off when we're taking folks in the order of their sign up. Individuals who have issues that are not within the jurisdiction of the board, we'll try to help you move those items to the right staff person or other agency that can help you. If you're not able to attend the board meeting and would like to present testimony to the board, you may send your comments to boardtestimony@trimet.org. And again, that's board testimony, one word, at trimet.org. So with that, I have 3 people who would like to address the board today. I'm going to call 2 of them up first. Shirley Block with ATU 757 and Ben Fain Jr. also with ATU 757. Please come on up. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good. My name is Shirley Block, president of ATU 757. I am a former 34 years plus employee at TriMet. Worked as a mini-run operator, full-time operator, fair inspector, supervisor, and field ops coordinator. I came before you today to present my concerns after taking office, the treatment my team has experienced from TriMet. Instead of working together collectively trying to resolve issues, Mr. McFarland continues to push back. A prime example was just last month during a medical meeting. When we arrived, I was pulled out of the room by Randy Stedman and told Mary and John was not welcome. Clearly, enough room was in that room. We came in willing and ready to clear the path and move forward for the employees and the company and work together collectively for the best interests of everybody. I just want to say I am prepared to go out to the community if it means knocking on doors, spending time with our politicians, going to media, and getting other local unions involved to get the word out to the public how Neil McFarland is disrespecting this local and treating his employees. I know for a fact they didn't want me in office the way the campaign team was treated compared to the freedom of my opponents was given. But for the board and for TriMet, I am here and I plan on staying. I am willing to return to the board with accomplishments or with opposition. I would prefer the accomplishment, but that's your decision. Clearly, I don't plan to go away. Take this away from the frontline employees and takeaways from the frontline employees and putting harm in harm's way has to stop. If Mr. Stedman thinks he can continue to deny and transcribe the contract the way he believes it is for him, for his benefit. Retirees cannot even go into the company with their badges after they've worked. Some employees have worked there 40, 50 years and retired and don't even have the respect to enter into the property when we know with today's technology you can address a small area that they can go in and at least associate, look at the report boards, or do something. Just to lock them out is totally disrespectful. The new fare system, no one has talked to the retirees about that. These folks deserve respect. And that's what I have to say.
Thank you very much.
My name is Ben Fain. Ben Fain Jr. I live in Aloha. I drove for TriMet for 26 years, and when I retired, I had received a 31-year continuous National Safety Council Safe Driver Award. I had some time previous to TriMet that I drove, and I volunteered to drive a bus since then. So for 13 additional years, that's what I'm going to do the rest of my life, I guess. I've got a couple of questions that are just rhetorical, and they're directed to everyone in the room. How many of you used the restroom out here this morning? I know there were 2 people beat me in there, and I got here pretty early to get my thoughts together for this statement. How many of you are desk drivers? I would assume that there are quite a few people in this room that work at a desk. The reason I ask that is that at a couple of recent charter meetings, we have a monthly meeting every month. The ATU Local 757 lets the retirees come in with the active people. And at 3 or 4 of those meetings, I heard it stated that there was a problem that in maintenance, and it was a health issue. This is that drivers have soiled the seats they work in. Those are polite words. So we're defecating and urinating where they sit. It explains it a little bit more graphic. This has happened 60 plus times. I don't have the exact figures or the time period that was done, but this is still an issue. And the suggestion was made that TriMet provide a cover for the seat, a plastic cover similar to a rain cap, only a lot larger, but that's just a momentary fix. That's not the solution. I believe that one of the resolutions to that would be, and I want to point out too that this isn't just unique here to Portland and TriMet. This has happened in other parts of the country. Seattle designated an individual to identify restrooms. These things aren't static. They don't remain the same all the time. And they need to be identified to the drivers in a way that they can safely stop the 40-foot bus and 20 or 30 passengers and secure the thing and then get to that restroom. There are some the safety part of that, in my opinion, is that there are restrooms and water intake that affects that. May I have a couple more minutes, Mr. Warner? A minute? Okay. Let's get right to the issue then. I'm going to ask that you, Mr. Warner, and you, Mr. McFarland, issue a statement verbally and in print apologizing for the atmosphere that created that. There's a atmosphere of intimidation, I believe, that's been going on since I was driving. It's not stated, but it's implied that you do customer service first. The statement I would like to see you issue is that no one will be fired for using restrooms. And I think that should be posted in the workplace too. And recognized as coming from you too, not Mary Fetch, not Randy Stedman, or Neil Laporta. Will you consider that? Would you do that?
I'd like to understand the full breadth of the issue before we issue any provisions or statements, but
I assume that.
You're first off, I guess, since you've asking a question, I want to let both of you know that we very much value the relationship with our employees and the union. We want it to be a collaborative process. We want to address the issues of common concern for the common good and also for the good of our customers. So your points are well taken. We know we're looking at areas where we need to provide rest stops in those areas, and I think we're doing the work on that. Maybe I could ask the general manager to give us an update on that at our next meeting, so we have some information, and then I could be able to respond better to what you're asking.
I have been retired for 13 years, but hearing this at that union meeting really got to me. It brought back a lot of things that I had gone through, and I won't go any farther on that. But this is something that would not cost TriMet 10 cents. It would make you two folks look more humane to the employees, and it would also let the public know that drivers are part of the community and that we're people too. We go through the same things they do. And I would
Correct.
bet there'll be a lineup at both restrooms after you guys get through in here for an hour or so.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Appreciate it. Congratulations on your election.
Thank you.
All right. Look forward to it. Ari Fontes?
Good morning, Mr. President and members of the board. R.A. Fonts from Lake Oswego, and you should all have one of these. I just want to do two things here this morning. First off, bring you up to date on AVs. This is one of the pictures of the Google car. It was introduced a year ago last May, and it is designed to do what transit does, except to do it better, to do it faster, cheaper, far more conveniently, and more safely. Now, we don't know when these things will be here. Google people say they hope to have it out before the end of this decade. In April of this year, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, which the U.S. is a founding member and supporter, released a study, a case study of Lisbon, Portugal, for its future transportation called Urban Mobility Systems Upgrade. As far as I know, this is the first major study that seriously considered the role of transit vis-a-vis autonomous vehicles. And it determined that high-capacity transit does have a potential role in the future, roughly similar to what it is today. But perhaps more importantly, going into the report, the authors realized the developments in autonomous vehicle technology were such that we could legitimately expect that bus transit would go the way of the dodo. Basic bus on-street transit. Not talking about BRTs here. Now, in Lisbon, basic bus transit provides about 25% of all rides. In Portland, all transit put together, according to the Census Bureau, is about 12% of all commutes. Washington County about 6%, Clackamas County about 4%. So if Lisbon goes down from 25 to nothing, imagine what's going to happen here. I have a modest proposal, and that is to convert MAX from light rail to bus rapid transit. Now we all know, or most of us know, that buses have an awful lot of advantages over light rail. They're faster, would be more frequent, there would be fewer major outages and delays. They have ultimately more capacity. They're more robust. When we have our earthquake, the bus system should be up and running years, perhaps, before light rail gets back into full gear. They're not finicky about hot days. They're more flexible. You can operate off alignment. They can give a single seat service all the way out to outlying communities. Their thing that really surprised me, though, I just found out about this about a month ago, is that they're cheaper, at least in Portland. The problem we have here in Portland is that the ridership is just not large enough to support light rail where it would be cheaper to operate than bus rapid transit. Basically, you're in a Goldilocks zone. If you can get, well, you have more information on your sheet. I do have available worksheets if anybody wants to get into the arcane detail of this. But basically, you'd be saving approximately $25 to $30 million a year right now. After the orange line gets in, another 5 to 10 million. When we go to autonomous vehicles and TriMet, and you will have to, for safety reasons, liability reasons, you can save another 10 to $15 million a year. I'll leave it at that, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Technology is interesting, and it's going to get more and more interesting as we move forward. So thank you very much for your thoughts. All right, that is all I have signed up this morning for the public forum. Or is there somebody else that we missed in sign up for the public forum? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close the public forum, and I'm going to call the business meeting of the Tri-County Metropolitan Transportation District of Oregon Board of Directors meeting for August 12th, 2015 to order. And we'll go right into board reports. And I think right up at the beginning, we have Director Prosser for both the Metropolitan Policy Advisory Committee and the Finance and Audit Committee. Are you ready to give us a report?
Sure.
All right.
The Metro Policy Advisory Committee, which is an advisory body to the Metro Council made up of representatives of local governments and interests around the region, had actually a very interesting meeting, our last meeting. We had a tour of the city of Milwaukee, hosted by Mayor Gamba, of redevelopment opportunities within Milwaukee. Also looking at the orange line alignment and how it plays into those redevelopment opportunities. And then it was followed up with a first of a speaker series that MPAC is going to be having. A gentleman, let's see, Joe, I think it was Miniconi, from Asheville, North Carolina. Works for a development company in North Carolina, but presenting a really interesting analysis about the efficiency of development as it produces tax revenues and how that impacts local government's abilities to deliver services. So it was a fascinating discussion and way of looking at the whole development process that I really hadn't really considered as much before. So I thought that was a really worthwhile meeting. So, thank you.
Any questions on impact? Can we just move right on to
Okay.
Finance and Audit?
The Finance and Audit Committee met this morning. We had a briefing from staff on the payroll tax ordinance, and I won't go into that because staff will also be giving full board a presentation on that. We did also get a presentation from staff on the actuarial report on our other payroll employee benefits liability, and that's been a big issue that we've been looking at over the past several years. The previous actuarial report showed that the actuarially accrued liability, unfunded liability for that, it was about $950 million. The latest report reflects the union contract agreed to by TriMet and our union, ATU, working in partnership to try to address that issue, and the most recent health insurance rates. And that actuarial accrued liability has dropped from the $950 million to about $711 million. So significant change, a result of significant work by this agency and our employees, and we really appreciate the hard work that everybody put in on that. We were going to have a discussion about the strategic finance plan, but we've ran out of time, so we're going to hold that over to our next meeting. So.
Any questions? All right, thank you very much. Mr. General Manager, your report?
Mr. Board President, members of the board, good morning. I wanted to first of all give you a report on the People's Preview and the Bridge Pedal that we held on Sunday, this last Sunday. It was an incredible event, actually huge crowds. We estimate 40 to 50,000 people over the day. We started off really in we had three really different events strung together. One was the Bridge Pedal, which of course was early in the morning. And I want to give a shout out to our staff who actually began at about 5:30 in the morning setting up for that. And this whole full day of events that followed. We closed out the Bridge Pedal, which ended up, frankly, starting with one Congressman Earl Blumenauer starting at bike counter number 1, By the time we were done, we had that number up to 13,000. So you begin to see the number of bikes. We did have a little congestion because a lot of people were queued up to see the bridge. And there was a little bit of sightseeing along the way, not just sort of serious biking along the way. But nonetheless, the event was very successful. At noon, we actually shut the bridge down for bike pedal because that was over, and we opened the bridge for about an hour and a half to our CAT committee on accessible transportation. Actually hosted the disabilities community and seniors on the bridge, and we had a number of really terrific tours. We had small buses of, for example, disabled children that were able to enjoy the bridge. We had a number of people in wheelchairs walking across or rolling across the bridge. A number of people with other kinds of mobility assists on the bridge, and it was a really, frankly, terrific opportunity for them to, frankly, demonstrate to them that the bridge was accessible to all. And again, taking advantage of the belvederes and places to stop along the way so that they could begin to see that it does accommodate the opportunity to actually stop along the way as well. At 1:30, we opened the barricades, and we had a very large crowd awaiting to access the bridge. And that's when we really saw huge crowds over the bridge all afternoon. Very, I have to say, heartwarming to be there and to see this. And many people, frankly, experiencing a piece of Portland history and memorializing that with photographs and selfies and a lot of other sort of acknowledgement. We had a certain amount of Portland weirdness there as well. We had a lot of sort of entertaining people, including my favorite, of course, is the Unipiper, with sort of the bagpipes on the unicycle. But nonetheless, we had also a great kickoff with One More Time Around Again band, and we had some serenading from the Portland Opera as well that afternoon. So it was a great event. You can begin to see the kinds of crowds. Frankly, our count is a little unsure because we couldn't really tell how many times people were going around the loop. It ended up being a very warm afternoon, but a very successful event. And again, my thanks to the staff, literally 12 hours of being on and organizing this crowd and keeping it safe, which it was, and everyone who was, I think, in a really terrific mood. So again, a very successful day. Just to note, this is where we are in terms of the countdown. So we got a window into how much the community is looking forward to this alignment with the event on Sunday. We now have 30 days. 30 days from today will be opened. And so this is really the first, or if you will, the last meeting pre-Orange Line of the Board of Directors. So I was hoping to bring up Dan Blocker to do a little readiness review for you so you can begin to see where the alignment actually is in its preparations. And again, very pleased at the overall coordination within TriMet, both for these events as well as the opening and the ramp up to the service that we'll be offering the public starting on September 12th. So Dan?
Well, good morning, Mr. Board President and members of the board. As Neil mentioned, I just want to walk through a little bit of where we stand on our preparedness for the opening day, which by my count is 31 days, because there's 31 days in this month. So that's the number that I'm using this morning. Sorry about that. But as Neil mentioned, it is 1 month from today. So September 12th, we have the grand opening. I have briefed you before on readiness, and I've described it in previous times as 3 parallel work streams: our project delivery portion, our operations readiness, and then our opening events. And so I'm going to follow that same format today and just let you know where we stand 1 month out. Beginning with our project delivery. So this graphic shows the major civil contracts and has a check mark by each one indicating they are all now substantially complete. We've spent about 96% of the money, and we're about 96% physically complete. There's about 26 million left to go, mostly in the systems and vehicles contracts, but there's still some odds and ends that we're doing on the other contracts, and I'll give you some highlights of that in a minute. So just a couple of pictures here. This is the west portion of the contract. It's in downtown from the section at the PSU turnaround at the lower part of the screen, winding its way down Lincoln and across the harbor structure toward the Collaborative Life Sciences building there in the top right. That was completed at the end of 2014. The bridge has achieved its final completion milestone as of June 1st. And I might also mention that Kiewit was awarded this year's DBE Champion of the Year award, which is a really great honor for them. Dr. Bethel presented that award a couple of weeks ago at a DBE celebration event, and I know they were very moved by being chosen as this year's recipient. On the east side, this was the last piece of work to be done, the Tacoma Avenue Park and Ride. That's now substantially complete. There's still a few finishing touches to put on that, but as you can see, the civil work is all quite done. The systems work as well, with the exception of the vehicles. The systems work of all the overhead electrics and signaling and communications, that's all in place. And again, there's some final touch-up to do on that. And then on the vehicles, we have 10 of them now in revenue service, out running around, both supporting the preview rides that we did, but also just in general revenue service. We'll have 14 of the 18 here for opening day, and then the other 4 will come online over about a month's time. So that works for our operations needs. As I mentioned, there's still a few little bits of fine-tuning we're doing. This is customary at this phase in the project. Once we get the trains running for our testing, we get feedback from the public about what parts, primarily from a safety perspective and mostly involved with the crossings, where things are working, where they suggest adjustments, and we always do some adjustments. So in this project, there's a couple I want to highlight. Down in the area around the Collaborative Life Sciences building at Moody, where the light rail turns and crosses Moody, it's a very complex intersection. There's a lot of activity there. It's where pedestrians, bikes, automobile traffic, streetcars, and light rails all converge, and they're all coming from their own right-of-ways. So a lot of activity from the students in the building as well. So when we first did the design and implemented what we did, we just thought it maybe could have some increased clarity. So we got a consultant on board, both a traffic engineering consultant, but also Ziba Design, to bring us completely different perspective than the engineering perspective to the process. And they suggested we make some adjustments. So this is a picture now of what is open. We've added a lot of green to indicate the bikeways very clearly. We've repositioned where some of the paths are relative to each other, added a lot of additional signage, made the signals more consistent. And so I think it worked out very well. We had it open in time for the People's Preview on last Sunday. We had a chance to see how a large amount of crowds and traffic interacted with it. We didn't have the streetcars, buses, or light rails there yet, but I was very pleased to see how much clearer and better it worked.
Excuse me, Dan, may I ask
Yes.
a question about this
Yes.
picture? Having visited Amsterdam and their bicycles and their crossings at crosswalks, I know in Amsterdam it's, you take your life in your own hands with the bicyclists and where they run and everything. But getting from the pedestrian lane over to the crossing, in my experience in Amsterdam is that there wasn't a lot of space on the street side of the bicycle lanes for people to stand, and I can't quite tell from the picture, do we have enough adequate space there for pedestrians to get over there and be out of the bicycle lane?
Yes, we do. So this crossing happens to be where the streetcar stop is, right opposite the Collaborative Life Science building. Okay. These barriers right here were temporary. This run of barrier and this barrier, which would continue off the slide, are permanent. So these are now removed. So the pedestrians have this clear crossing, and then they enter into the area where the platform is. So there's a lot of room behind the barrier. This one right here is gone. The cones are gone.
Okay. But it does raise another question. Now, is the streetcar rail just to the right of that yellow pad?
Yes, this is the end of the permanent rail.
Does that create a potential safety issue for people getting off of the streetcar without really looking for the bicycle coming by?
Well, no, it protects them from inadvertently walking out onto the bike path from the streetcar. They have to come into this
Okay, so there's
opening.
room in there.
Yeah, they come to this opening, they have this tactile warning and this marked crossings.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask that? Will there be any visual signs higher at eye level besides looking down to see that that's a bike path?
At this particular place, I don't think so, but there are others throughout that intersection, mostly indicating which signal a person or a bicyclist or a traffic vehicle should be following.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we have a couple highlights here of some things that we've done. Another bit of feedback we got, some members of the bicycle community felt that there needed to be some protection against the inboard railings. So we're going to add another stripe just alongside the inside of the railing to just help provide visual clues not to stray into the railing area. So that's something we're responding to. And then finally, here's another very complex intersection. This is 12th Street and 11th Street where it crosses both the light rail and also the UPRR tracks. And of course, a very complex intersection, a lot of activity here between trains and cars, bikes, and peds. So the design we implemented works, but again, we've gotten some feedback. We'd like to do a little bit more. We're trying to figure out, working with the city and the bicycle community, what the appropriate treatments are. TriMet has a hierarchy of treatments that we like to use. And so we're considering the addition of some bedsteads, little barriers that a bicyclist has to go around that slow them down and force them to look in the direction of the trains, possibly some swing gates. So we're still looking at alternatives there. So beyond the ongoing work we have, I should also mention a couple others, I'm sorry. We have two more pieces of work. Of course, the facilities maintenance building that we removed off of 17th Street opposite Center Street is being replaced in a new building on Southeast 20th. And at the board meeting last week, you approved a design contract to do the tenant improvement design for that building. So we'll be coming back at some point in a few months with a request for a construction contract to do that build out. And then additionally, the Federal Transit Administration gave us authority to add back to the scope the second shelters at each station. So as we were trying to reach a reduced budget for reduced federal funding, one of the things we did was at each station we had 2 shelters. We removed the one shelter in order to make budget. We still included all the foundation work and the electrical infrastructure to support them. And now the FTA has given us permission to add that second one back. So we'll be coming to you with an item for purchasing and installing more of the shelters. Okay, just a quick look at some overall statistics on the project. Project safety, worker safety has been terrific on this job. We've been tracking ourselves against the state average, which 6.8 is the incident rate for the state average. Our project is at 4.6. We're very pleased with that. And similarly, the time loss accidents, those are the more serious ones where somebody actually misses some time off or misses some work as a result of the injury. And again, we're running just about half of the state average there. So very, very good attention to safety by all our contractors as well as TriMet staff. Employment numbers very good. So we are now at, or as of July 10th, we're at 13,900 jobs counted against our target of 14,500. So again, it has very well tracked all through the progress. The percent complete and the percent of jobs have been remarkably close to what that FEIS estimate was. So we're very pleased to see that. For diversity in the contracting, here we have the overall statistics on the DBE program. 132 disadvantaged firms who did nearly $175 million in contracting. And that equates to about 26% DBE participation in the project. And again, very, very pleased with a really exceptionally strong program. And diversity in the workforce has been equally strong. If we look at people of color, it's nearly 25%. Women 8.5% and 17.4% apprentices. All of those numbers are terrific, not only from the perspective of the workforce in construction here in Portland, but really nationwide. These are exceptionally strong numbers. If we look at our budget status, to again remind you what this chart is. So this chart shows the initial final design entry contingency level and how we expected that contingency level to be used over time. So that's sort of the top of what we call the ski slope. Now, if we, at any point, if we spent more than we expected at that point in time, we'd be in below that top line. And we had a contingency management plan agreed with the Federal Transit Administration, and we were actually allowed to go a little lower than the line. As long as we stayed in this green zone, we were okay. If we went into the red zone, then we had to develop some mitigations that would show how we would continue and finish the project within the original contingency. As you can see here right now, we're even above our planned level. So again, we're in very good shape. 72.5 million represents both contingency that we have sort of pre-programmed for known issues still to be resolved commercially, as well as what I'd call freeboard contingency. And right now, our projection is that we will finish about $48 million under budget at the end of the project. So again, we're very pleased with that, and we'll do something we've never done before, and that's return money to the federal program. So the second work stream I wanted to talk about was operations readiness. This pie chart shows the status of our safety certification program. That's where we pre-identified a whole series of things that had to be verified through the design process and the construction project, that they were done and met our safety criteria. We're very far along on that. In fact, the design certification was actually completed yesterday, so we're 100% on design. Everything's tracking along there fine. Really, the bulk of the remaining issues are with fare collection and light rail vehicles, so everything looking good there. We also had a very large rail activation matrix that we were tracking that had 110 items, individual things that had to be completed in order to be ready to open. We're down to just 9 left, and most of them are just final testing and the remaining safety certification. So looking very good for opening. Our operations team has been working very hard, getting ready. Their employee training is going along very well. The numbers are over 1,100 bus operators have been trained and 130 rail operators trained, so that represents about 80% of the full workforce that has to be trained on the alignment. We've had a number of safety oversight reviews, one from the Federal Transit Administration, which is now complete, and we've done all the necessary things that they identified. We had a second one done by ODOT Rail, who serves as our state safety oversight agency. That one's still pending. We have not yet gotten the draft report, but we have gotten from them in the exit interview all the things they need us to do, and we've actually completed most of them. So I believe this will be a paperwork exercise to finish this out. And Harry's been very busy running a series of emergency preparedness drills. You can see there at the bottom 3 full-scale drills where we actually had volunteers out at these various locations simulating some sort of an emergency response and having the emergency responders come and deal with the situation. And it's really an effective way of getting those emergency responders familiar with the alignment and the situations that might occur. And it always works out some bugs that are good to do in the drill. So these are now all complete. And the last step of operations readiness is simulated revenue operations. So the last 2 weeks before opening, we run trains just as if we're in regular service, except we don't carry the passengers. And so that's a way to work out final details of the scheduling and just make sure everything is customary and in use. So that'll be the last 2 weeks. And that'll lead us up to our opening events. We've been doing a great many of these. We've done a lot of outreach. One of the first things we did before the school year ended last year, we did 8 preview rides for over 1,600 students, where we introduced them to the alignment and helped them learn how to be safe around the light rail vehicles. We've also been doing a whole series of preview rides. So on this next slide, I can point to this window of time where we've been doing 34 different preview rides for various community groups and stakeholders. It's carried a total of 5,200 people have been out running the full alignment already. So I want to give a special thanks to our operations team, because that's in addition to all the service they're regularly running, they were really great partners in making sure we could introduce the system very safely, as well as through those preview rides, make the system introduced to the pedestrians at the crossings so they get used to the trains being there. And finally, I think we have these remaining 4 large events to do yet. The August 22nd will be a fireworks celebration for the new bridge, and then a gala first dinner and turning on of the artistic lights on the bridge will be September 10th. The 11th is a 9/11 commemorative event highlighting our first responders, and then finally the grand opening on September 12th. I'll leave you with this picture from the People's Crossing last weekend, and again, as Neil mentioned, it was really a great honor for those of us who worked on the project to see this kind of wonderful public reception and how excited they were to finally get a chance to play on the new bridge. And with that, I'll take your questions.
Any questions for Dan?
Dan, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one question, or more like a concern. When we go back and where we had the green for the bicycles and the pedestrians having to come this way and cross in front of the bicycles to get out, I have a concern because there are a lot of bicycles who don't stop for cars when they're supposed to, or stop signs. I'm wondering what is in place, or what we will be trying to put in place to get bicyclists to understand, as you're on that stretch and you see pedestrians that need to cross over, to stop, give them space to come over, and not just keep saying, you don't break my speed, I'm coming straight through. So that was just a concern that I had.
It is a concern that all of us have, and it's one of the reasons we took on these additional markings, both the green but also all the crosswalk markings. That is a fairly long stretch. If a bicyclist doesn't encounter a signal where it crosses over, they could be going pretty fast. And so I think everybody's just going to have to be aware of their surroundings as they get down there. But we can and will evaluate how it actually works once we get it opened, and if we need to do additional treatments, we will do so.
Any additional signage coming into those areas to say, watch for pedestrians, watch for bicycles?
We have had A-board type signage out there again as we go through the acclimation period, and I would say we wouldn't be resistant of doing permanent signing if we feel that's what's necessary. And again, we'd have to work with the city on exactly how we do that and get it permitted.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Joe?
First of all, I apologize, I'm late.
I saw you back there listening though.
Yeah, I'm on vacation and I forgot that this. Dan, this may not be in your wheelhouse, but I want to recognize the people who've been out there during this rotten weather, helping people get used to the new orange line. And I don't know if it comes to board motion or anything else, but there's some pretty hot days, as you know, and there wasn't much shade yet along the light rail line. So however we do it, I think we should make some kind of special recognition or thank you or some way to do that.
I'll be sure to pass that along
All right.
to the folks involved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. It's a great project. We're glad we're where we are today and looking forward to the grand opening.
Well, on behalf of all of us who worked on it, thank you and the entire board for your support. This was not an easy project. It was done in not an easy political climate, and we really appreciate the board's very steadfast support all through the time we worked on it. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Dan. I'll continue a little bit with my report. And just to note that we also had our last Federal Transit Administration quarterly about this. I'll suffice it to say that they have identified us as the A student when it comes to federal grantees. We're very effusive, full of compliments. They heard from their consultants in their safety oversight review. No reservations at all about the opening on the 12th. We're more than ready, and compared to where many properties are at this point in time, we're well ahead of the game. So that was very nice to hear as well. We do have, as Dan noted, a number of events coming up. I just wanted to note that September 10th is, of course, the First Light event, and that will be a public event at Zidell Yards where people can actually come and watch and wait until about 9 o'clock when we turn on the decorative lights. There'll be a bit of a show associated with that. The 22nd, August 22nd is, of course, same thing. Site will be Zidell Yards, where we actually expect a pretty large crowd coming down to watch what will be an incredible fireworks display, again, put on by our grand opening sponsors. And then again, September 12th, and I think we got a little taste, as I mentioned last Sunday, about the excitement about this project and the opening, and particularly the bridge. And so we're gearing up for that in every way we can. It should be very exciting, a great day, and hope to see you all there. And just to note for everyone that the details of all these events are at catchtheorange.com. So we have a website set up with all of the details. With that, I just wanted to note a couple of the reports that were in your agenda packet today. One is on the e-fare project. I would just note quickly that our contractor in it has made very solid progress. You might recall that we delayed some of the advancing of final design in order to make sure some of the conceptual design issues were all worked out. That proved to be the exact right thing to do, because Innit is now making great progress and able to actually move through the work very quickly. Right now, all of the back office hardware is installed. We're continuing to develop the final design and final coding of the systems. There'll be a test of those systems off the shelf, or not in the old system, but if you will, a laboratory test of all those systems starting in about November of this year. So we're moving along quite well with the overall project. You might note that under key challenges, we're still wrestling with some of the issues associated with open payments. I also wanted to assure you that we're also underway with securing an overview consultant to take a hard look at both the integration efforts of this overall contractor as well as the cybersecurity aspects, and to really make sure that we've done everything we can to make sure the system is successful. So that work is underway. I just wanted to note, as you all perhaps get regular reports, we are underway with the construction of the underground conduits and foundations that will evidence the pylons for electronic fare along the light rail system. Stacy and Whitbeck is the lead contractor on that. They are on track to achieve their 22% DBE participation in that contract, so very pleased with that. And again, CH2M Hill has also hired disadvantaged business firm for inspection service, so they'll be increasing their disadvantaged business participation to about 11% as well. So we're very pleased with those little progress reports. And again, I notice Chris is here. If there are any questions, we're certainly happy to delve into them. If not, I'll just note into the quarterly performance report. I just wanted to note that we did see a little slip in our on-time performance for MAX over this last quarter. We have also stayed up above 80% with essentially all of our preventive maintenance activities, which is really our goal where we want to be, but maybe not excelling at quite the level we wanted to. We've also had some issues with pantographs. You might remember in June where we had a loose bolt in Hillsboro that was causing some problems. That took us a while to find that single bolt. Notice I'd say it's bolt, not the nut in Hillsboro, but nonetheless we found it and restored that. And I would also just note that we are in the ramp up to an opening, so all of our personnel are involved very heavily in training exercises and activities, and so that does also sap the available hours for some of these activities as well. We have graduated a new class, for example, in rail equipment maintenance, a new class of apprentices to the journey status, and made a couple of other outside hires, so we're in much better shape than we were, though everyone is working really, really hard through the summer, both with the challenges of heat and obviously the ramp up with new vehicles and their Orange Line training and the kinds of services that the operations staff has been offering for preview rides and all of that. So it's been a very, very busy time. I'd also just note that we've completed all of that essential training, as Dan noted, and one of the pieces that I wanted to just highlight was our controllers and signal maintainers are now FRA, Federal Railroad Administration certified, because we have joint crossings with the heavy rail system in southeast Portland and in Milwaukee. So they have to be certified not just for the transit side, but for the heavy rail side as they maintain the work. So that has been an added activity underway. So again, just a lot of hard work, nose to the grindstone. There's a little joke goes around the agency right now, which is, Neil, put down your green pen. We do not need any more good ideas until September 13th. I would just note the staff is doing a terrific job on the ramp up to the opening. I'm sure it's going to be greatly successful. And with that, that concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Neil by the board?
I don't have questions, but I just want to add in this busy time, I just want to thank all of your staff, and I'm going to go by groups but so I don't lose a name, with Shelley and Bob and Harry, and they took the time to take me and Director Bauman through Transit Police, Ruby Junction, Center Street, the new buses, all the mechanics, everything they do. Very proud, fascinating associates that all work for you guys. They were fabulous. I just want to thank every one of them. And they're, of course, didn't have anything else on their mind about right now. So thank you.
I'm sure it was fun for everybody.
Yes.
Good.
You know, back to the FRE, that acronym. So you have the railroad people, TriMet people, the city people, state people, because some of those roads are state roads,
Yes,
all working together on the signaling and et cetera.
exactly.
Boy.
And I
Yeah,
would
no
like-
more, no more ideas. That's, I know,
and
because I was sitting there the other day watching that, you know, stuck in traffic or waiting for the thing. And that's pretty complex.
It is complex, and I would just note, all of that is, and this is where you really have to, at least I have a great appreciation for the expertise of our staff in these areas. Each of those crossings are controlled by what we call a crossing order, which is actually a process that's managed by ODOT Rail. And it involves the local jurisdiction, the road jurisdiction. It involves the railroads involved, and in this case, us. So they are multi-party agreements about what will happen at each of those crossings. And then they're very meticulously implemented and all the boxes checked before they're actually certified for operation. So it's a very thorough process, but it does sort of lead to everybody being on board at the same time, although clearly it takes a certain lead time to get to that point.
Thanks.
All right. So before we move on to our actions items, I want to make sure, is there anything else the board wants to bring forward or discuss before we get into our action items?
Yes, I've got one quick disclosure. If I could have just a quick moment.
You bet.
Excellent. I wanted to make the board and the general public known that TriMet has contracted with EREP Incorporated, which is a company that I am a principal in, to introduce the Core Values Index Assessment, the CVI, to TriMet's leadership over the next month. And the CVI is a self-assessment tool that actually increases self-awareness and improved interpersonal communications. That sounds exciting. And each of the directors will be taking the CVI over the next month, and it'll give them the opportunity to learn more about effective leadership and communication skills. That contract will be in effect from July 20 through October 30, 2015, and the total value of that contract is $2,900, so $2,900. So I want to make sure that, in fair disclosure, that was made known. But I'm excited to be. Our company's excited to work with TriMet leadership in regards to that, and I am happy to answer any questions or respond to any comments.
Seeing none, thank you for that disclosure. That's good. Anything else? All right, then let's move on to the consent agenda. For anybody watching at home or on the web, the items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and may be approved by the board in one blanket motion. However, any board member may remove an item from the consent agenda portion of the agenda for discussion or questions by requesting such action prior to consideration of this portion of the agenda. So first off, is there any item on the consent agenda that any member of the board would like to be removed for separate action? I guess I do know that there's a couple changes I'd like to suggest for the minutes. I think you I made reference to the, when we were talking about the competitive process, and you made it, my comments related to just bidding only. It's actually, you know, bids or proposals. We just like competition. So I have a couple comments of what I think there, and I'll give these to you, okay? All right. So with those minor changes that I'd make, I'm ready to see if there's a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any other questions or comments? With that, I'll move on to the question. All those in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the single resolution that we have on our agenda today, which is Resolution 15-08-51, which is authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with Metro to provide funding for project development activities for the Powell Division Transit and Development Project. Mr. General Manager.
Members of the board, this is another step that we have brought to you in a series of steps related to advancing the Powell Division Bus Rapid Transit Project. You might recall a number of years ago, actually, Metro allocated a stream of regionally controlled federal funds called MTIP to TriMet in order to help fund the Portland-Milwaukee project, at the time the Lake Oswego streetcar project, as well as the Southwest Corridor. Since that original resolution, the Lake Oswego streetcar project has been pulled from the planning agenda, and in its place, the region is advancing the Powell Division BRT. So what this resolution really does is change the allocation, if you will, which has gone through, this resolution doesn't, but that allocation has gone through a review with the Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation, as well as other Metro advisory committees. And the recommendation coming back is to take those resources that were originally dedicated to the Lake Oswego corridor to the Powell Division corridor, and that's about $1.5 million. You will recall that the stream of funds that Metro allocated TriMet were then bonded back in 2011 to create a present value of something over $100 million that was then allocated to these various projects. So, in essence, long story short, what you're doing is returning about $1.5 million of the funds that Metro had originally allocated to us back to Metro to progress the planning work associated with the Powell Division BRT. And without getting into all of the mechanics of the bonding and the funding over a period of time, I would just note that those funds have been segregated and have no effect on our service levels or the ability for us to put service out. So again, they're focused on capital improvement, and they're essentially controlled by the policy resolutions of JPACT and the Metro Council. So I'm very pleased to answer any questions. That's a pretty short explanation of the activity.
I think it's pretty straightforward, but let's see if we have some questions. I'm seeing no questions, then. Is the board ready to offer a motion to approve Resolution 15-08-51?
So moved.
Have a motion?
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? All right, then, let's go to the question. All in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 15-08-51, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is approved unanimously. All right, that concludes our resolutions for this morning, and we're now going to move on to our ordinance to consider increasing the employer payroll tax. I'm going to turn over first to TriMet General Manager Shelley Devine for the first reading of this ordinance. Ms. Devine?
Not yet. Thank you, Mr. Board President. Ordinance number 340 of the Tri-County Metropolitan Transportation District of Oregon, amending Chapter 13 and Chapter 14 of the TriMet Code to amend the payroll and self-employment tax rates over a 10-year period as authorized by ORS 267.385. This is the first reading and a public hearing.
council. Now, to the general manager.
And Mr. Board President, members of the board, thank you very much. As you know, we've spent many months now working with many of our colleagues, particularly in the business community as key stakeholders of TriMet, meeting with the largest payroll taxpayers in the region, many of the business organizations, all discussing both our service enhancement plan process and the desire and the need for new service, as well as the 2009 authority granted us by the Oregon legislature associated with increasing the payroll tax. Today, we wanted to continue that conversation with you at this first reading, but I wanted to start my report with just some firsthand views about the need for more transit in this growing community. And so really to kick off my report, I was hoping to bring up actually two panels of people from our community, very respected people. The first panel I'd like to bring up would be Tom Kelly from Neil Kelly Company, Matt Cato from the Peace and Justice Director of the Archdiocese of Portland, and Pam Knowles from Oregon State University, and to offer some of their perspective on transit service in our community.
So, yes, I'd like to go first. Good morning, TriMet board members. It's kind of fortuitous that it took me about 35 minutes to get down here from North Portland. That usually takes about 10 to 15 minutes because I'm going to be talking about the transportation issues we have in the city. So I'm Tom Kelly. I'm president of Neil Kelly Remodeling Company. I'm also the founding board chair of the Oregon Business Association and currently chair the Portland Development Commission. But I'm here representing myself and my business today, and I want to talk about the congestion and your consideration to add more transit service. I bet you know exactly what I'm going to say because we all feel it. The congestion is terrible. It is adversely affecting every Oregon business. We need to address the problem sooner rather than later. If we were honest with ourselves, we would admit that we have been afraid to raise taxes to pay for transportation infrastructure and improvements we need. We haven't had a sustained plan from the state level since the mid-1990s. And frankly, the whole clean fuels transportation package situation that happened, I just was on a panel at the City Club talking about that, was quite frustrating. That hurts everyone from business to neighborhoods. And we do pay for the inaction. We pay for it in terms of sitting in traffic, burning gas, and creating extra wear and tear on our vehicles. And I think sometimes not mentioned enough is the impact it has on our environment. Those motors sitting there on the freeways and the arterials just simply running and emitting carbon. Maybe the worst thing is, though, we are paying for it with something we can never get back, our time. The cost of congestion study says if we made minor investments, we could spend about 37 million fewer hours stuck in traffic. That equals about 27 hours in traffic per household per year. That time lost is tragic. It's not how I think a livable community should be. And I can recite dramatic numbers, but I want to be practical about our experience at Neil Kelly. It's getting impossible to tell our customers when we are arriving because there's no reliability. We can't tell if we will be 10 minutes early or 40 minutes late. And that unreliability affects our suppliers. My company has, on any given day, 70 or so vehicles running around town, going back and forth, and another 30 or so that are parked at job sites. And that's just our employees, not the subcontractors and trade contractors. When you have a crew of guys ready to work with a load of drywall that is expected at 9, but it comes at 11 because traffic is so bad, that wastes a lot of money. And it also puts us in a bad light with our customer. And I hear about this from businesses all over the region. I'm a longtime supporter and firm believer that transit is part of the overall answer. Your proposal to increase service with a gradual increase in payroll tax seems prudent, and I urge you to do it because we can't wait. You know, frankly, when I write that check, I'm going to hold my nose a little bit, but I think in the end it's a good investment for my company. When my father founded the Neil Kelly Company, his generation built bridges, roads, and even TriMet. Our generation needs to step up and do the same. We need to act with leadership by providing the next generation with some alternatives to the unsustainable path we are on. Your decision can make a sustainable difference for the next decade. And I just want to make a comment that I'm reading a book called The DNA of a Sustainable Company, and in that book it mentions Mr. McFarland, a book by Sandra Saran, and Tuck Wilson, and I just think that I want to congratulate you on the new Orange Line and coming in so far under budget's just incredible. So thank you for the time.
Good morning. I'm Matt Cato. I'm Director of the Office of Life, Justice, and Peace for the Archdiocese of Portland. That's the social justice element of our Catholic faith. Last month, I hosted the 29th Annual Social Action Summer Institute, a national conference. The focus was ecology, and thankfully, Pope Francis' recent encyclical, Laudato Si', came out a month before it began. And that document really has captured the world's attention for everyone's need to care for creation, especially the poor. This is the same document that Mayor Hales traveled to Rome to meet Pope Francis, along with 15 other international mayors, to see what can be done locally to make a difference globally. Pope Francis is a phenomenon. He's also a transit user. When he was Cardinal in Argentina, he gave in or traded in the Cardinal's limo so that he could take mass transit. He doesn't need mass transit in Rome because the Vatican's very small, so he can walk everywhere. He doesn't believe in cars. We, the Church, so strongly believe in transit that I hope you'll indulge me as I quote directly from Pope Francis in Laudato Si'. The quality of life in cities has much to do with systems of transport, which are often a source of much suffering for those who use them. Many cars used by one or more people circulate in cities, causing traffic congestion, raising the level of pollution, and consuming enormous quantities of non-renewable energy. This makes it necessary to build more roads and parking areas, which spoil the urban landscape. Many specialists agree on the need to give priority to public transportation. If some measures needed will not prove easily acceptable to society unless a substantial improvement is made in the system themselves, which in many cities force people to put up with undignified conditions due to crowding, inconvenience, infrequent service, and lack of safety. End quote. What you are considering is exactly what Pope Francis has been talking about. You're talking today about improving our public transportation system. Transit is a great leveler. Transit is colorblind. The rich and the poor benefit from transit. For many of you for many people who are poor, it's the only way they get to work. It's the only way they get to the doctor. It's the only way that they get to the grocery stores and to schools. They ride our buses not by choice, but because they're bus dependent. Transit is one way that we can make a difference and save God's creation. So I understand you're considering adding service to the Cully and Lentz neighborhoods. These residents desperately need more service. Many are recent immigrants, and giving them transportation options help them succeed, which helps all of society. The office funds programs in both neighborhoods, programs that are working with the poor and the immigration population. And transportation is essential just to live, just to get around. There's no question that the next generation understands the need for more travel, perhaps better than my generation, and surely better than my parents' generation. That they are already showing that they choose buses over cars. So I'd encourage you, please, to make this great leap of faith. Trust that providing more service is the right thing to do. It will help the local community. It will help protect God's creation. Thank you.
Pam?
Good morning, President Warner and members of the TriMet Board. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. I'm Pam Knowles. I'm a 6-year member of the Portland Public Schools Board of Directors, Zone 5, which is Madison Grant area. And before I start on my formal remarks, I just want to say how happy I was that I got here a little bit early today so that I could see some of the presentation about the new MAX line. And as the Executive Director for Industry Relations at Oregon State, I want to commend you on the wonderful color you selected for the line. Thank you. Good choice. Okay, on to my formal remarks. I'd like to take the opportunity to acknowledge the strong partnership between TriMet and Portland Public Schools and the important benefit that TriMet provides to the students and the youth in our community. As you know, Portland Public Schools is the only school district in the state that has no yellow bus service for our general high school population. We do serve special needs students on yellow buses, and students who don't live close to a bus line. But for the most part, our students rely on TriMet system for transportation. I want to compliment the efforts that TriMet has made to serve the needs of our transit-dependent students. Among other efforts you have undertaken to serve students, TriMet has worked closely with the district to adjust routes and schedules so they match student schedules for classes and extracurricular activities such as sports, and added service at key travel times to reduce crowding. Of course, with the closing of Franklin High School and the moving of our students from that school to Marshall, we are working with TriMet to monitor the impacts on bus lines serving Marshall, and TriMet has agreed to provide extra service when needed. So thank you very much for that. It's making our transition for those young people to a different school for 2 years while we modernize Franklin much easier. You've partnered with the school district and the city of Portland to provide free transit for our high school students, providing a tremendous benefit to a large number of low-income families in the district, helping students get to school, to employment opportunities, and to other community events. It's a huge plus for our students. You've reduced youth fares to better meet the needs of all young riders. Thank you. You partnered with the district on special programs such as our high school diploma completion program called Summer Scholars, which works with students during the summer following their senior year to help them finish up those last few credits that they need for graduation. The program raised the district's on-time graduation rate by 1 percentage point over the last 2 years. That's a big jump. Finally, as a parent of millennials myself, I can attest to the increasing reliance on public transit among this rapidly growing group. I have 3 millennials. Only 2 of them have a car, and they all rely on transit for their transportation to work and to a lot of the things that they do after work. We are becoming socially hardwired for transit use as the millennial generation emerges as the largest and most influential demographic since the baby boom. TriMet's service enhancement plans spell out how the agency hopes to expand to the growing demand for transit service, changing demographics, and the threat of added congestion. I'm with Tom. It took me 30 minutes when it usually takes me 10 to get down here today. We are happy to see that many of the improvements envisioned in the plan will directly serve Portland schools, particularly high schools, increasing frequency and adding capacity to address crowding. In conclusion, I thank you again for the many, many important partnerships that you have built with Portland Public Schools, and the benefits to our students are well worth that effort. I want to encourage the board to continue its leadership in working with the community to develop this vision for the future, and encourage you to move forward with steps to secure the resources needed to implement the plan. Thank you so much for your partnership, and thank you for having me here today.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for your dedication to thank you for your dedication to public service and what you do. It's greatly appreciated by all.
Indeed, my thanks as well. And we have 3 additional voices to bring up, if we could. Mark Gamba, Milwaukee Mayor, Pete Truax, Forest Grove Mayor, and Steve D'Angelo from D'Angelo Catering for additional perspectives on transit in our region. And again, thanks to the last three again. Very eloquent.
Morning. Morning. Would you like to start?
Sure. Good morning, Board President and members of the TriMet Board of Directors. My name is Steve D'Angelo. My company, D'Angelo's Catering and Events, was founded in 1982. I'm an old Rose City Transit user, if you are old enough to remember that. We're located next to the West Tracks station at 9037 Southwest Burnham at Ash Street in a transit-oriented development zone. I'm also the president of the Tigard Downtown Alliance, which is vested as a 501c3 partner in assisting with the revitalization efforts taking place in downtown Tigard. So today I'm going to speak from a couple different perspectives. My company provides event services throughout the region. Everything from social events to corporate galas, picnics, grand openings, as well as social events to nonprofit functions. These events are from Hillsborough to Vancouver to Salem to Fairview and everywhere in between. We spend a lot of time on the road. We're also very privileged to have TriMet as one of our customers and are very excited to be part of the new Orange Line opening. I had the opportunity to preview the Orange Line as one of the stakeholder groups. Many takeaways from that ride, and very, very excited to see that service come online and be a part of that. We bring food and parties to people, and that's getting harder every day. The congestion is choking off our ability to really serve our customers correctly. And it's no wonder. This is among the fastest growing regions in America. And that growth shows no sign of slowing down. As an old Portland boy, who knew that it was going to be the place to live in the country? Young people are especially drawn here. I believe we need to use that to our advantage. Young people are more likely to use transit and alternatives to get around, but they can only use the services that are available to them today. The proposal you're considering would increase transit in suburban places that haven't traditionally had it. That is innovative and it's important. It's hard to believe we're at the point where suburban areas now have enough people to support new transit service, but we are clearly there. The traffic demonstrates it. As many of the other panelists, I left early this morning to assure that I would be on time. I know that with the changing attitude in favor of transit by the new generation, coupled by the inability to get around and the high cost of owning an automobile, I believe if you provide more service, they will come. My company serves the region, but we're located in Tigard. The southwest part of Washington County is becoming a community in gridlock. In essence, that costs our customers more money. We desperately need more transit. I hope that eventually we get a light rail line to serve our needs, known as the Southwest Corridor Project. In the meantime, if we can increase the level of bus service with shuttles, additional lines, and more overall service, that will help us all for the near future. Your proposal of a small gradual increase in the payroll tax, 0.1% a year, is affordable. It's not going to be a big burden for us, and I can certainly assure you no one wants to pay more taxes. But we need to get our vans and our trucks moving. Getting more people on the bus and out of the individual car makes financial sense for the entire community. We need to have more relief on the roadside so commerce vehicles, especially our trucks, can get through traffic so we can have more fun in life with the events we produce daily. Thank you so much for your time.
I'll go next since Mayor Truax is a hard act to follow. Good morning, President Warner, TriMet Board. I'm Mark Gamba, I'm the Mayor of Milwaukee. I'm also on the Policy Advisory Committee, and I'm a small business owner in Milwaukee. For starters, I'd like to say thank you. Milwaukee is brimming with excitement. The imminent opening of the Orange Line and the private development interest that's already knocking down our doors all inspired by light rail. We look forward to a more vibrant and economically viable city for the decades to come. Both our residents and our businesses will benefit from the Orange Line, as well as the improved services envisioned in the service enhancement plans. Recently, the region identified the need for substantially more transit service in the climate smart strategy. This very important policy adopted by MPAC, JPAC, and the Metro Council works towards solving the greatest issue facing us all. An important aspect of that strategy is that if we continue to use the current funding models, we will not be able to achieve those goals. Of course, in the backs of everyone's minds was the idea that that funding, that additional funding, would come from the federal and state government. Yesterday in a meeting with Senator Merkley, I became even more convinced that we will not be seeing much, if any, income from the federal government, let alone an increase in federal funding anytime soon. Clearly, transportation funding is going to be a difficult issue even down in Salem. I believe that our region is going to have to figure out how to start funding much more in the way of transportation projects on our own. In the long run, I suspect that will save money on projects, given that every federal dollar comes with a lot of loopholes or hoops to jump through and makes the project more expensive. Payroll tax is certainly one of the strategies for self-funding, and other sources should be added into that. It is always difficult to be the people making the hard decision, the unpopular decision. But what makes sense and what is popular are often not the same thing. I support the board in using the authority given by the legislature in 2009 to increase the payroll tax. As a society, we have dithered far too long in taking the necessary steps to combat climate change. Now is the time to be bold and to take the necessary steps to invest in the future of our region. Thanks.
Thank you. Mayor?
Thank you very much. I'm Pete Truax. I'm the mayor of the city of Forest Grove. Mr. President Warner, thank you very much for the opportunity to testify this morning. Couple of comments off the cuff. Your next route ought to be a purple and gold line. As a Husky, I am eagerly looking forward to the day when I can once again be arrogant, okay? And I had no problem getting here this morning with traffic on Highway 26 from Forest Grove and the west side, because I watched it as I went by on the blue line. So again, thank you for the opportunity. When I first ran for city council in 2000, one of my issues was finding a way to bridge that 6-mile max gap between the Hatfield Government Center in Hillsborough and the city of Forest Grove. In my 15 years since then, I've learned 3 things. 1, you don't always get what you want. 2, your agenda changes dramatically because of the needs, both real and perceived, of the voting public. And 3, sometimes you get what you need or want in other ways, and I'm going to explain all of that in a bit. I also, for the past year, have been the chair of the Metro Policy Advisory Committee that Mayor Gamba is a member of. That group, which meets twice a month to offer guidance to the Metro Council. It's been a rocky relationship in the past, and I tried this year to develop more communication links between the 2 organizations. Our major advisory capacity is in land use areas, while our counterpart, JPAC, is involved with transportation. But in the real world, we find land use issues and transportation issues often collide. So we have a responsibility to work with JPAC and with the Metro Council so that the entire region makes headway. I came to government service after 28 years in the classroom as a high school English teacher. It was during those years I noticed we had a population of students that could not access extracurricular activities because they had no transportation. One of the hang-ups was no bus service other than to and from home on that ever-popular yellow bus fleet. Other schools in the metropolitan area had the opportunity to use TriMet for after-school transportation. This problem was further exacerbated when the Student Health Center was built at Forest Grove High School to serve all the students in the district from grades K through 12. Again, the health center was a godsend, but getting kids from low-income families suffering from a paucity in private transportation was a difficult task. I'd earlier talked about the 3 things I learned in politics. 1, I didn't get the MAX service that I campaigned for some 15 years ago. 2, I found myself working on other transportation issues involving road safety, freight usage, and commuter reliability. My dream of MAX to the Grove, it took a back seat, no transportation pun intended. But here, and this is the important 3rd lesson I learned, with the cooperation of a variety of partners, TriMet, Ride Connection, Metro, the Forest Grove Senior Center, and the City of Forest Grove, we were able to implement a bus service around the city to help move people, including seniors, veterans, the disabled, the homeless, and those with severe economic hardships to bridge that notorious first mile, last mile gap in public transportation. GroveLink, as it's now known, allows us to move people from throughout Forest Grove to shopping centers within the city, to medical appointments, and to a host of other destinations in the city. In addition, the service links with Line 57, one of the most widely used bus lines in the TriMet system, and moves people beyond the limits of Forest Grove to other appointments and destinations throughout the metropolitan area. We hoped for some modest success when we began this service in the summer of 2013, 2 years ago. The 2-year target, the 2-year target of ridership was met 6 months into the operation. It continues to develop and grow, and we are engaged in serious conversations about future funding because, to be frank, GroveLink is not going to go away. In the short span of 24 months, it has become part of the fabric that weaves together our community. We are very fortunate to be working with such partners and to have such local leaders as Councilor Ron Thompson and Senior Center Director Rayanne Johnson supplying essential leadership. The payroll tax increase is just one way TriMet is able to increase its footprint in transportation solutions in our region. That tax may morph into additional matching funds through grants and such as to significantly help continue GroveLink and bring about the creation of similar services throughout the TriMet service area. Mr. Kelly's comments about providing for the future is something we all need to listen to, because those people in the past took care of us. We need to take care of those who follow us. And the Archdiocese of Portland also hits the issue of equity square, and we need to pay attention to that. Thank you very much for allowing me to testify, hoarse throat and all.
Thank you very much. Questions or for the folks? Again, I just want to reiterate, just like I did in the past group, thank you for your service. I think it is all about partnerships, whether it's the private sector or the cities of Milwaukee or Forest Grove. I think we got some great opportunities to continue the partnership, and I'm so pleased that GroveLink is as successful as it is, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens in downtown Milwaukee as the area grows and takes advantage of the light rail line construction. I think it will be an amazing opportunity for the city, and I think you folks should be commended for looking at it as an opportunity for the city too. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. And my thanks to the panelists as well. As you know, in our outreach that I described earlier, we've certainly heard some concerns as well. So we've attempted to address that in the crafting of the ordinance that is in front of you. And I'd like to ask Bernie Bottomley to come up, if he could, to sort of walk through some of our more recent conversations and some of the changes that we've made in relation to that as we put together the final proposal that's before you for first reading today.
Great, and I think I'll start a little bit farther back than that, just to remind you of the context of where we are and the requirements that are built into the ordinance. So this first slide just is a reminder of where we are in the process. We reviewed the authorities and requirements at the June meeting, got the report from Eco Northwest that's required as part of the findings in July. In August at this meeting, conducting the first reading of the ordinance, and then, if you so choose, in September, the second reading of the ordinance, and that would trigger then a January 1, 2016 implementation date. Just a brief reminder, this increase was authorized in 2009 by the by the legislature as part of a broader transportation package. TriMet elected not to try to exercise that change over the intervening years because of the recession, and also because of the need to make adjustments in the cost trajectory of the agency, which you have now accomplished. The ordinance addresses both the payroll tax for employers and the self-employment tax, and it has a statutory condition, which I'll discuss in just one second. And then, as the general manager mentioned, we've had discussions ongoing for about the last 9 months with the business community and with the larger payroll taxpayers in the district. So the statutory requirement is that the board must find that the economy in the district has recovered to an extent sufficient to warrant the increase, and in making that finding, the board shall consider regional employment and income growth issues. In your packet connected to the ordinance is an economic finding that you would adopt as part of the ordinance. It includes the analysis that Eco Northwest provided, and essentially that, and is supplemented by some additional information that has come in more recently than their report. And essentially the findings show that employment in the region has reached pre-recessionary levels, and it actually has grown beyond pre-recession levels. Unemployment is down below levels seen prior to the recession, so actually we're seeing unemployment levels that are associated with very fast growth periods, such as 2000, 2007. Per capita income and wages have recovered significantly from their lows during the recession. They're not fully recovered to pre-recessionary levels, but the trajectory is certainly pointing in that direction. And the growth in the economy, in regional GDP, and the existence of very tight labor markets are expected to push wages higher in the coming months as competition for jobs, for employees, I should say, is heating up, and that will push wages up, and wages are a significant portion of per capita income. So, turning to the ordinance itself, I wanted to call your attention to section on the second page, the section that is denoted by the letter C there, the long paragraph just below the table. And this was a section that we developed over a couple of conversations with the business community to address a concern that they raised, which is essentially that there's growth in the base payroll tax associated with inflation, increasing number of jobs, and increases in real wages. So that's a reflection of productivity increases in the economy. The concern was that those drivers of increases in the base payroll tax could generate enough resources so that the agency could expand its services sufficient to meet the requirements of the Regional Transportation Plan, which is sort of the benchmark for the level of service that we'd like to be able to provide. It's what's called for in the regional plan, in the local transportation and land use plans, and at the state level as well. So the request was that we look at a hard stop to the implementation of the tax after 5 years, and then have another reconsideration point similar to what we're doing today before implementing the second 5-year period. In our judgment, that presents some significant problems for us in terms of long-range planning, in terms of bonding against that resource, and in terms of planning service expansion with the community. So we would have to really ramp down any expectations and any discussions really with the community about service expansions that would rely on that second 5 years of implementation. However, we did want to be responsive to the request that there be an opportunity for the board, for the staff, and for the business community and others to review the experience with the payroll tax after it had been ramping up for a period of time, to look at this question of whether the base growth is increasing our resources sufficiently to meet the regional transportation plan requirements. So what we have proposed is that after 5 years of the ramping up of the payroll tax by 1/100% per year, that before we move to the 6th year, the general manager would commission a report, and we would expect it to be an external report similar to the one that Eco Northwest provided, that provides a 20-year look, so analyzing what has happened with the growth of the payroll tax historically, and then projecting that out into the future using the econometric models and expectations about the economy that are available at that time. That would give us a sense of how we've been doing, how we've been performing, and how we expect the economy to perform going forward. And we would then compare that to the resources that are necessary to implement the regional transportation plan. And the language goes on to say that if the resources have been and are expected to be higher than what is necessary to implement the regional transportation plan, that the board would then delay the next increment of the payroll tax from going into effect for 1 year. And the reason for that is that the expectation would be that we are able to grow the system sufficiently to meet our needs without that increment for that year. And then for each year after 2020, the staff would generate an update to that report, so adding an additional year of experience and an additional year of projection to that report, and redo the analysis and reanalyze for that additional year, have we met the threshold of meeting or exceeding the regional transportation plan needs. And if in the subsequent year the board found that yes, again, we had exceeded the resources necessary, then you would have the payroll tax increment would be delayed for an additional year. On the other hand, if the report found that the resources weren't sufficient, then the next increase would go into effect automatically. So essentially, the phase-in goes from a 10-year phase-in to a 5-year phase-in, plus additional years in which the agency has resources that are sufficient to meet its needs until the final 1/100% is implemented and the base rate goes to 0.008%, or 0.008 as a number. The final, I guess that's it on that piece. The resolution that's before you has that updated language, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on that particular issue or on the financial findings.
Very quickly, I just want to make sure we're all got the right document.
Yes.
The document that
So-
we're making
right,
reference to.
that's what I was pausing
Is
for.
the
I wanted to
document
check.
that was,
Yeah.
it was provided to you in the blue packet here this morning. It has
Yeah.
the changes, under, I guess it is, section
C.
section 2, 1309,
Section
C
Yeah,
is
so
where
if
the
you look
changes.
down, just to make sure you have the right version in front of you, the last line says annually after 2020 until the final increment of the new rate is implemented.
Okay, all got the right document? All right, good.
Okay.
So we're looking for questions on this, first of staff. We'll probably get into the discussion on this after we have opportunity for public input. So.
Okay.
Other questions? I don't see any questions. Okay, there we go. All right.
Maybe it's a question of Shelley, the attorney. Does this pass muster at the, not muster, with the state legislature on the ORSs?
This structure meets the requirements in the statute. Yes, the statute says that we can't implement the phase-in any more quickly than 10 years, but we can implement it in more than 10 years.
Yeah, I got, okay.
That, Bernie said that correctly.
I don't know if you're the person to answer, Bernie, but this really makes me nervous that in 5 years, and illegal, somebody goes in there and makes a challenge and all the money's frozen.
Well, the way...
And I'd like to know
Sure.
how much money do you think, estimate, that we would, that TriMet would receive with this increase?
Well, the current year
Ballpark's fine, you know.
value is about $4.5 million. At the end of the 10-year ramp-up, it would be, in today's current dollars, around 45 to 50
Okay.
million
All
at
right.
the end of a decade. Just to go to your first point, the way that this is structured is that the board's action could be referred, but what would be referred would be the updated ordinance after 5 years, which would actually, if it were referred successfully, would cause the payroll tax increase to be implemented in the year 2021, as opposed to being deferred for a year.
And do we know how many businesses have come to Oregon or started up, I mean, into the TriMet district in the past 7 years?
I don't have that number, but I can get that for you.
You know, I'm just curious how the hurt is going to be spread around.
I can get that number
I mean,
for you. I don't have it.
I used to read the sports page first thing, now I read the business section, and there seems to be a lot of people coming, a lot of businesses here either starting up or wanting to move here, so. Which would influence how I'm thinking about the 5 and 5, or.
So I think it's one of the things we want to make sure is we have any questions for staff, since we're not going to be taking action on the ordinance today. If there are additional pieces of information we need before we actually take action at our next meeting, I think this would be a good time to get those identified and on the table, so staff could give us some answers. So thank you for that, Director Esmond. All right. Anything else from you?
Report, I think the next notion would be, unless there are questions for me, that to go to the public hearing, and then we're certainly able to answer questions after that as well, that may come up during that conversation.
Do you have something now, or you want to wait till after the public testimony?
Do it now.
Okay.
Thinking about it. That 4.5, you know, 4.5, which is a ballpark, that goes into the general fund?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, our commitment is to begin to use that to improve service throughout the region, begin to implement the service enhancement plans. Obviously, you've been briefed on in other settings.
Okay, thank you.
All right, good. Well, with that, as Neil said, let's move into the public comments on the proposed ordinance. I want everybody in the audience to know that written comments already received online or through the mail have been shared with the board, and comment cards that are completed today will be forwarded to the board members and will become part of the formal public hearing record before we actually take action on the ordinance. In a moment, I'm going to invite up those who have signed up to speak to come up 2 at a time. And comments, I'd like to be limited to 3 minutes if possible. You know the drill. When the light turns yellow, you have 30 seconds to complete your comments. When the light turns red, please proceed to close comments. This is to ensure equal time for each person who wants to comment, and maximizes the number of people in comment. I really don't think it's going to be a lot of issue. I think I only have 4 people at this moment signed up for the public hearing on this item. If you wish to share additional information after your 2 or 3 minutes, you can conclude them in a comments cards, or again, provide them to us in writing before we take action on our next meeting. So we want to hear from you on all that. So with that, I'm going to open the public hearing, and the public comments will now be taken. So I'm going to call, as I said, you up 2 at a time. R.A. Fonts and Pam Treese.
Again, R.A. Fonseca Oswego, and for the first time in umpteen years, I'm finding myself opposing a tax increase. 2 basic reasons. First off, I don't feel that TriMet has done enough to hold down its own costs. Prime example, of course, is West. I've talked about that before. If we shut down West at $6 million, that's more than would be the increase you're proposing for this year alone. Streetcar is a big one, but it gets a buy this year, and perhaps thanks to general managers' efforts. I don't know who to thank, but they're making a major difference, and they're coming about halfway in 1 year, going up to $2, expecting to pay about 15% of costs, but that's still only about half of what TriMet riders pay. It really needs to be comparable with TriMet. The Phil Knight monthly pass a couple months ago, you heard how we were charging the poorest, old and disabled 25% more for a standard fare. However, the Phil Knight monthly pass is only about a quarter of what not the disabled, but the single parents and Afghan war vets pay. It's only going up 8%, $28, still about 1/4 of what the other folks pay. And they're among the wealthier users who happen to be over 65 or disabled. The costliest bus services, number 18, I believe, has a fare as a cost, which is actually higher than that of using a taxi. It's a short ride, about 1.2 miles on average. Why are we providing it when it's cheaper for these people to get a taxi on their own? And this is the neighborhood of Pittock Mansion. It's not the poorest part of Portland. We've had an uptick in overhead reflected in systems costs over the past few years. It's going the wrong way. It should be going down as a percentage of costs. And on the orange line, well, we can just keep our fingers crossed. My second problem is that the proposed use for the tax revenues are rather scattered. We seem to be just throwing a bunch of stuff against the wall and seeing what's going to stick. There doesn't seem to be a long-term perspective. Now, obviously, I come from the very much concerned with the idea of how autonomous vehicles are going to affect TriMet. And so the kinds of things that I would like to see would be things that are more geared towards long-distance services, paying down debt, building reserves so you can convert. And in general, this board and this general manager need to lay a groundwork for the conversion to autonomous vehicles, or else the system cannot survive. And thank you.
Mr. President Warner and members of the TriMet Board. My name is Pam Treese. I'm the Executive Director of Westside Economic Alliance. We are a public-private organization, and we support and intend to grow the economic vitality of the west side of our community. That includes the west side of Clackamas County and all of Washington County. I'm here today to testify on the payroll tax increase. But before I do, I want to make sure that you know that we have a letter in your packet, as Mr. Warner mentioned. We also, I want to take the time and commend the leadership, both the board and the TriMet leadership, on the work that you've been doing to date. We recognize the extensive work that happened in relationship to the contract negotiations. We recognize the work that you've done on your enhancements, and we appreciate it. I also want to say that my experience in working with the leadership of TriMet has been that your intentions have been transparent. You work with us closely. We've had attendance at our transportation meetings by members of the staff. We've had meetings with the leadership by our executive committee, and we've had both Neil and Bernie come to our board meeting to talk about this issue. So that's very important to us, and we do appreciate it. We also appreciate the fact that we've been able to provide comment that has been taken seriously, and we've watched you work within your confines to take those comments to heart and to implement changes. So thank you very much for that. I do want to comment on the fact that the payroll tax increase is high, and it is going to be difficult for many businesses. We make two requests. As Bertie talked about the hard stop, we were in favor of the hard stop. We appreciate the changes that you've made in Section C to accommodate an adjustment period after year 5, so thank you very much for that. We also request that you look at the possibility of a management leadership advisory group, that you consider taking members of the business community, both from the largest employers as well as small business, to look at what is happening over the course of this 10-year time frame. So we would encourage you to do that. We also, since the West Side is, we have the largest employee base on the West Side, we really want you to continue your look at West Side enhancements. We still have significant last mile issues for our largest employers. We do appreciate the West Side enhancement work that's been done, but we're not finished yet, and we want to make sure that that work does continue. We want to make sure that there's continued support for the Southwest Corridor, for TV Highway, and as Mayor Truax talked about, the Forest Grove Grove Link process. Again, thank you for your partnership, thank you for your leadership, and your willingness to communicate with our organization at all levels. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice timing. Thank you very much. All right, the next two are John Charles and Marion Haynes. Good morning, John.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thanks for having me here. Just as a preface, I would like to note that between last meeting and this meeting, you've now run 12 consecutive witnesses up here whose sole job was to tell you how wonderful this tax increase was. As before the hearing even opened, and none of them were on the clock. And I was timing them. Most of them all went past 3 minutes. So I'll just say, you know, I've testified in the legislature hundreds of times in the last 35 years in front of almost all the committees. Even the most hostile committee chair doesn't run 12 witnesses in a row on one side of the issue before the gavel even drops for the hearing. So, you know, you can talk a good game about fairness and equity and justice, but from my standpoint, as a political minority, it seems pretty unfair to me the way it's going. To the ordinance, I won't talk much about it. I've already emailed you. There's no drama here as to what you're going to do. I'll instead just raise a broader philosophical issue, which is the question of who pays and why. Businesses and self-employed pay more than half the freight for general operations. Users pay anywhere from 19 to 27%, depending on how you choose to calculate fare box recovery ratio. And if you look in other contexts, how electricity is priced, how water is priced, users tend to pay quite a bit of operations and capital. They don't just fob off their bills on their neighbors. And yet here, I've never heard anybody talk philosophically about what is the proper role or the appropriate cost responsibility of users versus non-users. And I'll just say, if you're going to have another half-day planning retreat, you might consider what we do for in highways. You know, the Oregon Transportation Commission has just as keen an interest in their revenue stream as you do. And you might think that the trucking associations, whose members pay a weight mile tax, and the AAA, whose members tend to pay a gas tax, would be at each other's throats as to who's going to pay the most. But actually, they're very friendly to each other, and the reason is Oregon is a national leader in doing what's called cost responsibility studies. It's very technical. Every couple of years, another study is done, consultants are brought in, peer review committees are brought in, and they look at what's the cost of the highway system and who bears the responsibility for paying their fair share. And by the time you get through all that, you might not like what the gas tax needs to be or what the weight mile tax needs to be and the proportionality of it, but everyone understands that this is a highly sophisticated, very technical, almost scientific process to get to cost responsibility, and it allows people to not dicker over that issue. From your standpoint, as far as I can tell, you say, well, we have government grants, we have payroll tax, we have fares, and our goal is to get as much as we can from all three. And users pay a very tiny share. And as I've said in my emails to you, as a rider and as a lobbyist, I have not opposed a fare increase for more than 30 years. I think the transit industry in general is underpriced. I don't understand if you have some kind of self-esteem problem that you're afraid to ask users to pay for what is an expensive service. I think you should. But before you even get to that point, you should talk about cost responsibility philosophically. Why is it that the payroll tax is paying more than half the operations cost? Why are users not paying a larger amount? Until you have that conversation, these hearings are going to continue to be very arbitrary. That's all.
Good points. Good points. Mary, nice to see you.
Thank you. Good morning, President Warner and members of the board. My name is Marion Haynes. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs and Economic Development for the Portland Business Alliance. We represent about 1,900 businesses throughout the entire Portland metro area. A well-functioning multimodal transportation system is critical for moving both people and goods and does contribute to our economic competitiveness. We recognize the importance of the service that TriMet provides and appreciate the considerable efforts that have gone into driving cost efficiencies and trying to work on the contract and ensure that there is a focus on long-term financial sustainability. It's been a tremendous effort. It's very laudable, and thank you very much for that. The payroll tax, through the payroll tax, employers are the largest contributor to TriMet's general fund resources. It's about 60% of the total. The proposed increase of 0.1% amounts to a 14% increase in the payroll tax over the 10-year life that's been proposed. Coupled with the last payroll tax adjustment that ended in 2014, it's about a 37% increase in the payroll tax since it was created. That's a large increase, and employers do notice that level, the magnitude of that increase, particularly because it is an increase in the tax rate on top of what is a growing employment base and a growing base over time. Employers do support mass transit as an important element in getting workers to work and addressing congestion issues. They understand and embrace that they will contribute to funding the mass transit system. Many even voluntarily pay for employee transit passes to further encourage usage of the system. That being said, as I alluded to before, we have heard from employers, some of which we don't often hear from, that this particular increase, well, frankly, it's a doozy for them. They've run the numbers and they're concerned. Given the substantial funding already generated by employers and the size of the increase, we indicated earlier in June that we could not support the full 10-year implementation of the tax as initially proposed. 10 years is a long time. Forecasts are always off. There could be changes in the employment base, as Mr. Bottomley noted before. I think some folks have run numbers and we think that the projected increase due to the tax rate may be low in some circumstances. And so having the ability to sort of check in and see where we are is important to us. A state transportation could actually pass at some point, which would bring more money to TriMet through an outside source, negating the need for as much coming from an increased payroll tax. So we do appreciate the strong partnership with TriMet, as well as the outreach and discussions. I want to particularly thank Mr. McFarland and Mr. Bottomley for the work they've done in coming to the Section C language. We did prefer the hard stop, but this is helpful. We do also think that having a business advisory committee to review this at those stages would be helpful and important as well. And we look forward to continuing to work with TriMet in the long term to ensure the system serves the needs of employers and employees and maintains our economic competitiveness and quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Appreciate it. Thank you. I think I'm just looking around. That's all who signed up to testify. Is there anybody in the room that missed the sign-up sheet and wants to testify on this ordinance today? Seeing none, then I'm going to close the public hearing. Mr. General Manager, you have any final comments or thoughts?
I would certainly like to bring Mr. Bottomley up, and as the board considers this and discusses it, perhaps there are questions you have. We'll be certainly happy to respond to any that you might suggest.
All right, comments, thoughts, suggestions from the board? This is an opportunity to get some things out on the table here. Ready to start? Everybody's looking at me. Well, we don't have to, but would you like to proceed?
No, that's fine. You know, I appreciate all the comments about the payroll tax. Nobody likes to see increased taxes. Nobody likes to see increased fares, but sometimes it is necessary. Everybody wants to see improved service, strong service, and you know, it's almost a simple math problem. That you have to pay for that service somehow. Coming onto the board, you know, as everybody knows because I've talked about it, you know, one of my priorities was to see what we could do to improve service to suburban areas. This is not the same region that it was 10, 20 years ago. And you know, this agency, we do not do a good job in providing service to more outlying areas. We've seen huge demographic changes too, and we're seeing that where low-income residents used to be concentrated more in the inner city, we're now seeing a pretty substantial shift of low-income folks to more of the outlying areas, and they move away from service that they need. So we need to do a better job of that. I was thrilled to find out what this agency's been doing with the service enhancements plans, and I'm a major supporter of that, because we're going out and we're talking to communities throughout our entire region about the service that they need, and we're looking at ways that we can address those needs. And and it's good work, and we're coming up with some good solutions. And it is going to take some funds to implement those solutions. It doesn't do us a whole lot of good to go through a whole major planning effort, come up with, you know, nice recommendations, and then not be able to do anything with those recommendations. The increase that we're looking at in the payroll tax is going to help us follow through on those commitments, and it's going to help us provide services where we do not do a good job now, and serving businesses in the outlying areas, serving residents in the outlying areas. And we really need to do that. I know that Westside Economic Alliance and Portland Business Association would prefer what they're calling a hard stop. What they're asking for in that is an increase of half of what we're considering now. You go through this whole, it takes us back to square one in 5 years. We go through this whole process again. And yeah, you can do that. But in providing needed services, we have to have the ability to plan with some degree of reliability over a period longer than 5 years, and have some confidence that we're going to be able to follow through and implement those plans. So I personally don't think a 5-year window is adequate for that. I'm not thrilled, quite honestly, about having a review at the end of 5 years. we can do it. And if that helps to assuage some of the concerns that have been expressed by our business partners, I'm supportive of that. But I think, you know, this agency has proved, and hopefully, you know, this board has proved, that we're willing to make some of the hard decisions, take action to address past problems, and then move forward with providing efficient service. So yeah, we can do that review. I don't think it should be necessary, but if it helps address concerns, okay. There's also been a request for a business advisory committee. I'm all for outreach, bringing people in, having discussions, opening what we do. And so if we put together an advisory committee that includes business representatives, I'm all for it. But one thing I will say, and I think the experience that those of us who worked on the strategic finance plan found, when we did more proactive outreach and invited stakeholders in to talk to us about the strategic finance plan that we were putting together at that time, as it turns out, I think one of the real advantages, and I'll say for me as a board member, but I think also for those people who were invited, was to have a variety of interests represented, because we do provide services to a variety of stakeholders, a variety of communities. And I learned a lot, quite honestly, by the discussion that occurred between the various groups. So to have an advisory committee, I think, is great. I would just ask that it include more than just the business interests. So I am, at this time, I will be supporting the ordinance. I think it is necessary as we, to allow us to fulfill the commitments that we've made to our partners, throughout our entire district, and provide the kind of service that will really help this agency move forward. I should also point out that another reason I'm supportive, having sat on MPAC and worked on the Climate Smart Communities plan that was adopted by the Metro Council, looking at how this region will address climate change, improve our economic health, improve our environment. That plan cannot succeed, absolutely cannot succeed, without enhanced transit within this region. And when that plan was put together, all of the interests sitting at that table fully understood that that was going to require additional revenues, particularly for TriMet, also for traditional transportation. This is really kind of the first step in making sure that this region steps up to the plate to improve our environment and improve the economic health of this region. So.
What he said. No, that was what Director Prosser just referenced, is a lot of the key points that I was looking to make sure that we got across and communicated in regards to this I believe, critical ordinance that we need to take a look at, and I believe we need to move forward. I want to express the appreciation that I feel to all the folks and all the stakeholders that expended countless hours in helping move this forward. I know Bernie spent a lot of time out in the business community and the stakeholders there to ensure that we listen and we're transparent in our process. So I thank Bernie and his team and the rest of the TriMet team, but I also thank all of the folks I know, West Economic Alliance, Portland Business Alliance, Cascade Policy Institute have spent a lot of hours making sure that their members are well informed about this process. East Metro Economic Alliance has been a part of it. So I certainly want to thank all of those organizations for the commitments required to put in the time and effort to make sure that we're moving forward with something that's going to enhance our region. I want to briefly talk about philosophically, as was referenced by John Charles, in regards to, philosophically having a discussion in regards to how how TriMet is funded and against the fare box recovery and all those items. And I'm certainly willing to, as we move forward, have that discussion. But I want to just respond a little bit from my own perspective, in my opinion. As you look across the country, there are various ways that transit districts are financed and funded. Everything from payroll taxes to, I think payroll taxes, actually the way we do it is fairly unique. But there's sales taxes. There's taxes on the actual employee. I mean, there's tons of ways that transit districts are funded. But when we look at it, it all basically comes down to the concept of some association with an income. Whether it's a sales tax or whether it's the taxing structure that we utilize, it comes down to the basic concept of some portion of the income that's paid to an individual. And we can take a look at that and talk about where it sits and how it's reflected on whose income statement, whether it's the business's income statement or the personal income statement. We can have that philosophical discussion, but it comes from a similar pot of money. And so as I look at that from the perspective of, and there are many ways that we can talk about and have this discussion, but as we look at this funding mechanism, as we look at this increase, I see it as being significantly beneficial for this entire region. As I think about some of the things, and I represent, of course, the east side of the metro area, as I think about the expansion that we're having, as everybody knows, the Subaru plant is going to be sited at a location there called the Gresham Vista Business Park. That's going to be something that's going to require additional transit options. Then we've got the Trip property that's going to require additional transit options. All of those things are new to our region, and it's going to require enhanced service in all those key areas. And those are things that benefit every single one of us, as far as those people contributing to our communities, both from a financial perspective, but then enhancing our communities in other various ways that aren't always directly associated with just the finances of a community. And so, as we look at this concept of philosophically looking at the funding mechanism, I welcome the conversation as we move forward, but I feel very comfortable, as we're talking about this increase, where this sits, because as we look at it from a trickle-down perspective, it all comes from a very similar pot of money that we're talking about. It's just where does it actually get reflected? I want to also touch on the concept of the 5-year review. As with Director Prosser, I'm not a big fan of it. I mean, I understand the mechanism, I understand the lever that would like to be put in place, but this board and this administration has done, I think, a phenomenal job in looking at the strategic financial plan, of putting in guidelines essentially that help this organization for the long term stay focused on the primary things that we need to stay focused on to build a sustainable organization. But we've also been very focused on a transparent organization. As we put together the strategic financial plan, we reached out to all of our partners, as Director Prosser mentioned, and incorporated all of their thoughts, ideas, and concepts into that strategic financial plan that I believe sits on top of any of these financial decisions as we move forward. We looked at a lot of different things. I think we'll be having a strategic financial plan update here in the future meetings, but one of the things is making sure that we take a look at our financial house and make sure our financial house is in order to some degree. And we've done a lot of things in accordance and alignment with that plan. So there's still some work to do. I certainly understand that. But, I look at that 5-year review and I see it as similar to what was referenced earlier by Director Esmond, and when he said, well, how do we effectively do long-range planning and ensure we're going to be able to take care of the new employment jobs that are going to come to our region if we have this potential cutoff at some point in time. Stable funding and expectations is something that we all ask for, especially from the business community. I'm a principal in an organization and company, and I know what it takes to make sure that we can do long-term projections and have something consistent to depend on. That's very, very important. When we think about transportation at the state level, we think about the same thing. The variability of potential transportation funding at the state and federal level is sometimes actually quite agonizing, trying to make sure that we've got the adequate funding to move forward the plans that we have. So these are the things that bring me some concern in regards to how that goes. And I agree with Director Prosser on the advisory committee concept. We need to be inclusive of all the stakeholders that actually have some input to be given on those things. So in conclusion, while I'm not a fan of some of the components that we've adjusted this with, I certainly understand and appreciate these adjustments. And I do think, as a board, we've been very open to looking at how do we bring together all of our stakeholders, listen, and then make changes and adjustments. I believe the 5-year review is something that meets some of the recommendations that have been made, and I'm going to be supportive of this ordinance the way it's been presented today.
I certainly am in support of the ordinance. I do believe and know the necessity of having the enhanced service improvements as well as additional service that will be needed, particularly as it impacts those who are transit dependent and those who have less income and less opportunities in terms of making income to be able to afford and to get to whatever jobs that be available, and hoping that those new jobs that are going to be created in these particular areas will continue to have an overarching effect of reaching more people in the city who are presently in that unemployment statistical realm to become those that are employed long before we see a whole lot move into the city to take those particular jobs. But in recognizing that transit is important and will be important as we continue to grow and expand, I will be supporting it. I do have, as has been stated, those concerns about coming back a midpoint to make a decision about something, but again, it's something that at this point I think I can live with as we move forward to getting the services that we need. Thank you.
Director Martin.
I'm happy for my board members that came before me.
Oh, come on.
Covered everything that you can. I appreciate everybody's opinions coming in on this, both the positive and the concerns. 10 years is a long time, but it's got to be a growth plan. And I get a little concerned when people believe it's going on deaf ears. The reports that I've seen in the outreach and going back and amending what's a possibility in the 5-year plan, a hard stop is a 5-year plan, not a 10-year plan. And just the fact that we can have the revision for everyone to believe that we are listening, and we are listening. And transportation is very important for myself, both on a personal level and a business level. I get employees to work, and transportation's not a part of employment as far as if they can make it to work or not. And a lot of them position themselves so that they can get to transportation to get to work. I would take transportation everywhere I went if it were where I needed it, and which is saying the outreach and moving this transit so I don't have to be stuck getting here. And I wasn't sure why you necessarily were late this morning for the same reason as traffic.
What?
And
Pay
so
for that.
I know.
Just pick it on you.
So I am going to support the ordinance. I do believe in transportation. I think the outreach is there, and I think it's going to keep our citizens, everybody, independent. And with that independence, it's going to bring positive contribution back to our community.
Thank you. Director Esmond, any comments or thoughts?
Yeah. After I said my comments about the 5 years plan, and I started thinking back a couple months ago, maybe when the gavel came down in Salem, how many some bills would be influence the business community with their expenses, and what's probably going to be on the ballot next year. It makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways, but I just want to be able to craft the language, and Bernie knows, and John knows, Marion knows, that people can take the I and make it into a T or something. So I'm not going to be here in 5 years in this position. Probably a lot of us won't, but I want to have some insurance, like going forward, that it's going to be the intent is to have the business review, look at the expenses, have the oversight committee though I'm loath to advocate for one more committee. This is the City of Roses and committees. Yeah, I'll be supportive of this. There's no other choice in a sense that transit has to grow. It's duh. And the days when you could drive your car from Southwest Portland and park in front of Myron Frank and get in, get something, are long past gone. So, thank you. I don't think I have anything else. I'll be in favor. I might have some questions on the side before I get my final vote about the economics.
Yeah, good, I'm glad to hear that. So, again, I won't say much because I think most all of it has been said. I will point out that raising taxes is never pleasant and not something we take lightly. The legislature did give us this authority in 2009 because they in the region all felt that it was very critical to the future of TriMet to have this resource and have this resource increased to deal with the increased demands on our transportation system here in the region. We heard a lot about it this morning. So I think we've been very, very conservative, judicial in terms of taking our time. We knew in 2009 the economy was struggling. I think we're at the point now where we can take advantage of this bill and move forward. And I also do want to state that I'm here because I want to see transit increased, and I want to see us meet the demands of the region and help the region grow, be economically competitive, and protect the quality of life that we all cherish in this area. So I don't necessarily like the 5-year review that we have in the ordinance, but I think if this is something that will help deal with the assurances from the TriMet board that, again, we will be looking at this on a regular basis, and this is at the end of the 5 years, we have an opportunity to determine what our levels of resources are, and if they exceed, I can remember exact language in the ordinance, but if they exceed in a significant way what we thought we were going to occur, the board will have an opportunity to take action to defer this for a year or more based on the way the ordinance is written. So I don't like it, but I can support the inclusion and the language that staff has put in here to address some of those concerns. Again, I can't go on without mentioning the fare box recovery. I think TriMet does a very good job of achieving a high level of fare box recovery. And John, you haven't been here at the meetings when we're dealing with fare increases on a regular basis, and we can fill this room very quickly. And frankly, there's a lot of folks who are transit dependent cannot just afford increases at the fare box. But I think fare box recovery is something that we always strive for, and we will have some further discussion about this in the future. There's no question, especially if the federal government's role continues to diminish or remain constant, as it looks like it will. And with that, I think I'd like to suggest that we make a commitment as part of the discussion on this ordinance that we will direct the general counsel and the general manager to figure out how to put together a standing committee, advisory committee made up of firms and individuals who pay our payroll taxes, both large and small, as was represented. But I think we do also need to have some other balance on that committee so that we can have a robust discussion of the pros and cons of that. But really specifically have this standing committee, focus on I guess that's the section 1309C of this ordinance, which is that 5-year review, and give us some guidance when we get to that 5-year point. So I'm comfortable with that. Is the board all feeling comfortable with that? I guess I'm seeing everybody nod their heads here, so I think you can consider that as a directive to move that forward. Hopefully you'll come back with kind of a dialogue about how you see and who you see on this committee, and how we can actually use them to their best benefit to address this section of the ordinance and help us, frankly, be better about our decisions in terms of service and revenue.
We'd be delighted to do that.
Okay, all right. So Neil, do you have any other response or issues you want to get on the table?
No, I don't. I did want, Bernie, just for the record, just sort of summarize the average increases and the costs associated with this increase again, just so that we sort of have that verbalized as well. I know it's in your materials as well.
So the median increase is for the median firm in the region about $8 in the first year and about $82 in the 10th year. And for the median self-employed, it's a little over $1 in the first year and a little over $12 in the 10th year. The average is higher than that because there are firms that kind of throw the average off. I won't name them by name, but I think we know who they are. So the average is slightly higher than that, but it's basically because of those large firms that throw off the average.
That would be it, unless there are other questions, board has.
Okay, well, I think, I guess I would encourage the board, if you have other questions or data needs before our September 16th meeting, please get a hold of staff and get that so you're feeling prepared. I think Director Asman, you mentioned a couple things I think staff will get you some information on. I think I have the information I need, but if I think of something else, I will get back to staff. So again, pointing out, we're not taking a vote on this ordinance today. We have a vote scheduled for our September 16th meeting where we either can approve or reject this or start over again if we feel there's other changes that need to be made. So unless you have further questions, I think we're done on this item. Director Asman, did you?
Yeah, I want to make sure I thank the staff here from Neil on down around. I get my hands in various places and feet, besides my mouth, around town, following up with various groups, say how the thing's going, and they all praise. Well, not praise, but say, guys, you guys are doing a good job and making sure the message gets out that TriMet has changed a little bit, and we're going to move forward. And our house is in order financially, and this tax is a good thing for the whole region, you know. So, thanks.
All right. There's nothing on our action or remainder of our agenda. Is there anything else to come before the board for consideration, a business meeting? Okay. Well, if not, then I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much again to everybody, for all those of you who came and also the staff.
What did you say?